Imagine a game so realistic that every swing of a sword, every drop of sweat, and every crafted item feels completely real. The moment this game launched, billions of players jumped in, hoping to become heroes or even kings. But while everyone was obsessed with combat classes and powerful skills, nobody paid attention to the profession that seemed completely useless. That mistake would allow a single player to break the entire game. This is the Genius Blacksmith's game. The story starts with the sound of metal and fire echoing through the darkness as a scream cuts through the heat. And in that burning silence, everything changes. Kang sees him, his father standing in front of him like nothing is wrong. And Kang's voice breaks as he calls out, "Dad!" before rushing forward and grabbing him, smiling for the first time in a long time as he clings tightly and says he will protect him. But something is wrong as the air grows hotter and flames begin to rise across his father's body. His father looks down in panic, saying he is still burning, and it is hot and it hurts. And Kang's eyes widen in horror as he yells for him to get out and run. But it is too late as the fire consumes everything. Kang jolts awake gasping, sweat pouring down his face, realizing it was just a nightmare. But the pain still feels real as the camera lingers on his face and body, revealing massive burn scars, a disfigured body and face that carry the weight of what happened. The scene cuts to a hospital lobby in Seoul, where Kang stands masked up, hiding what is left of his face, waiting until his friend Kim Ji-hoon arrives and looks him up and down, saying, "Man, aren't you hot wearing all that?" And instantly Kang's eyes sharpen as he snaps, asking if Kim is trying to die, pulling his mask down slightly to reveal his scarred face, and immediately shifting the mood as Kim freezes and quickly apologizes, saying, "Sorry," and to get to the point. Then explains, there is a new game called Ares, and that there is an event where breaking a wooden dummy can win 50 million won, adding that with Kang, they might actually have a chance. Kim leads Kang outside to a capsule, a sleek standard model VR unit, saying it costs 10 million won, shocking Kang, while Kim explains it still has an 85% sync rate and is safe to use. And when Kang questions how a billion people are playing something so expensive, Kim shrugs it off, saying it is an investment and that in-game rewards can be traded for real money, and it is enough explanation to just get in. Kang asks where Kim even got it, and Kim brushes it off, saying that does not matter, and to think about how much they could earn. But Kang pushes back, asking if there is any guarantee they will make anything and calling him crazy, until Kim suddenly gets serious and says they actually have a chance because of Kang's blacksmith class in Ares, calling him Kang Hyunsu by his real name, and reminding him that he is the only son of a world-famous master craftsman and the only successor, saying that with his skills, a wooden dummy is nothing. Kang goes silent, slowly removes his cap, and finally reveals his face fully, covered in massive burn scars, saying he is not in any condition to do anything like this. The story flashes back to the accident where Kang's father is trapped under rubble inside a burning building as Kang rushes in calling out to him, pushing the rubble with all his strength and lifting him onto his back before running through the flames. Then cuts to the hospital where Kang sits bandaged, watching over his father who never wakes up. Realizing the medical expenses were too much and his family was too poor, truly the American healthcare experience. The next scene shows the construction site where Kang works as a laborer, while his boss yells at him to swing a hammer. But Kang admits he cannot even do that anymore as tears form in his eyes because he cannot put strength into his right arm anymore. Back in the present, Kang tells Kim to give up and that he will deal with his own problems, saying he needs to return the capsule and go to his part-time shift as he turns to leave, but Kim yells after him, calling him an idiot and saying he knows Kang is barely surviving his father's hospital bills and that this life is not sustainable, telling him that even if he can survive like this, what about his future? And that the game could pay for all of his father's treatments, even though it costs 3 billion won, telling him he cannot just give up, shouting that Kang once said he wanted to be a blacksmith for the rest of his life, and that he is not the Kang he used to know, insisting there is a real chance in Ares, and that he will take responsibility for the 10 million won capsule, and begging him to just try it once. Kang stands frozen, looking down at his shaking hand, before the scene flashes back to a construction site where the sound of metal echoes deeply in his heart as he watches someone hammer glowing steel. And in the end, he returns to Kim, silently stepping into the capsule and saying to himself he will listen to the sound of metal he has missed, before a blue notification fills the screen, welcoming him to Ares and beginning character creation, as Kang is bathed in blue light and asked for a nickname, to which he responds Hyunsu, while the system scans his body and his scars slowly disappear, restoring his appearance and shocking him as he watches his right hand regain strength, realizing this might mean he is now in 10 million won of debt and he will have to work hard to pay it back. He is then teleported to Barden, a beginner zone, where a smithy appears and an unfamiliar old blacksmith is seen muttering to himself about instructors and how he will forge a superior sword while violently hammering metal and begging for it to turn out right. But suddenly Kang appears behind him and calmly says that he is doing it wrong, startling the old man, who turns around confused and asks where the stranger came from, while Kang repeats again in a calm voice that he is doing it wrong. After criticizing the old blacksmith's forging method, Kang immediately caught the man's attention. According to Kang, the technique being used would never produce a truly strong sword. Naturally, the old blacksmith wasn't happy about being corrected by some random outsider. Looking him up and down, he questioned who Kang thought he was, and what gave him the right to criticize a craftsman with years of experience. Kang quickly admitted that he might be speaking out of turn, but explained that he could tell the old man was genuinely trying to create a proper blade. Because of that, he simply couldn't stay silent. If Kang spoke as though he knew what he was doing, then perhaps he should prove it himself. Without hesitation, the old man handed over the hammer and declared that he would be watching closely. Originally, Kang's plan had been simple. He wanted to earn the old blacksmith's favor, so he could use the forge. But this opportunity was even better than he expected. Kang immediately agreed to forge the sword himself, but only on one condition. If he successfully demonstrated his skills, he wanted to keep the finished weapon. In exchange, he promised to show the old blacksmith a forging process worth far more than the price of a single sword. The old man laughed loudly at Kang's confidence. Still, something about the young man's attitude intrigued him, so he accepted the condition. However, before stepping aside, his expression suddenly turned serious. If Kang failed to deliver results, he'd have to pay the price for his arrogance. Kang simply nodded. Standing before the forge, Kang gripped the hammer and stared at the glowing steel. It had been 3 years since he'd last forged anything. He had acted confident, but deep down, he wasn't entirely sure whether he could still do it. Then he brought the hammer down. The moment steel rang against steel, a familiar feeling surged through his body. Despite the years that had passed, the sensation hadn't left him. As he continued striking the metal, memories surfaced one after another. He remembered his father lying helpless in a hospital bed. He remembered the conversation he'd had with Kim before entering the game. Most importantly, he remembered why he couldn't afford to fail. Silently, Kang prayed that his father would hold on just a little longer. The forge grew hotter with every strike, but Kang barely noticed. The heat against his skin, the sparks flying through the air, the sound of metal echoing through the workshop. It all felt strangely comforting. These were sensations he thought he had lost forever. A smile slowly appeared on his face. It felt good to be back. His body remembered everything. The movements came naturally. Every swing flowed into the next without hesitation. The years might have passed, but the blacksmith inside him had never truly disappeared. Watching from the side, the old blacksmith initially remained unimpressed. In his eyes, Kang was nothing more than another outsider. Forging wasn't something that could be mastered through imitation. But as the minutes passed, his confidence began to waver. Kang's posture was stable. His strikes were precise. Every movement looked practiced and deliberate. The old man narrowed his eyes. This wasn't someone blindly copying what he'd seen. This was someone who had forged before, Even so, the old blacksmith believed this would be as far as Kang could go. Without skills, there was always a limit. In this world, results determined whether someone succeeded or failed. No matter how talented a person was, extraordinary achievements required extraordinary abilities. Yet despite that belief, he couldn't understand why Kang looked so happy. The young man wasn't forging for rewards or recognition. He genuinely seemed to enjoy it. The old blacksmith found himself growing increasingly curious. Eventually, Kang did something that made his eyes widen. Rather than continuing normally, Kang began folding the steel back onto itself. The old man stared in shock. Fold, reattach, refine, again and again and again. As the process continued, realization dawned on him. By repeatedly folding and refining the steel, Kang was gradually removing impurities while strengthening the material itself. The old blacksmith was stunned. How had he never considered such a simple solution? Unable to contain his curiosity, he activated his appraisal skill. Orange light flashed from his eyes as a system window appeared before him. The result left him speechless. The steel had improved from D grade to C grade. His jaw nearly hit the floor. He had produced C grade steel before, but never with such speed, never with such efficiency. At that moment, he finally realized Kang hadn't been bluffing from the start. Still, he reassured himself that this had to be the limit. There was no way the steel could improve any further. Yet even as he thought that, he silently found himself hoping Kang would continue. Hours passed. The old blacksmith eventually sat down on a nearby bench and drifted off to sleep. When he finally woke up, sunlight was creeping into the workshop. Yawning, he glanced toward the forge. Then he froze. Kang was still hammering. The old man shot upright. His eyes widened. His mouth hung open. All night long, Kang had continued forging without stopping. He wasn't exhausted. He wasn't frustrated. He looked happier than ever. The old blacksmith couldn't understand it. How had Kang not run out of energy? Had he really spent the entire night repeating the same process over and over? Then it happened. The steel suddenly began to glow. The old man activated his appraisal skill once again. Moments later, another system window appeared. This time, he almost stopped breathing. The steel had risen from C grade to B grade. He couldn't believe it. Someone without a single blacksmithing skill had just created B-grade material through technique alone. The impossible was happening right in front of his eyes. And Kang wasn't even stopping. The old blacksmith began wondering whether Kang was aiming even higher. At long last, Kang finally paused. Looking down at the steel, he rubbed his head and admitted that it had been a while since he'd forged like this. Maybe he had pushed himself a little too hard. Before he could continue, the old blacksmith rushed over and grabbed the steel. His eyes were shining. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely excited. He immediately asked Kang to continue giving instructions and promised to follow whatever guidance he was given. Kang smiled and agreed. The two spent the rest of the day working together. They hammered, refined, and inspected, sharpened again and again. Eventually, the old blacksmith performed another appraisal. The moment he saw the result, he exploded with excitement. There was no way. The steel had become a grade. An A-grade material meant one thing. A rare grade weapon was now possible. The old blacksmith could barely contain himself. His appraisal skill wasn't anything extraordinary, but in all his years, he'd never seen a rare grade weapon forged in the beginner zone. This was history in the making. Surely Kang was thrilled. Yet Kang simply shook his head. It was still too early to celebrate. The old blacksmith stared at him in confusion. What did he mean? Kang calmly explained that the hilt still wasn't complete. The blade wasn't sharp enough yet. More importantly, the weapon still hadn't reached the level of durability he wanted. It needed to withstand overwhelming force without failing. The old blacksmith was left completely speechless. Even after creating a grade steel, Kang still wasn't satisfied. According to him, the sword hadn't reached its peak. Moments later, the old man burst out laughing. He had never met an outsider like Kang. When asked why he was so skilled, Kang simply shrugged and explained that he'd loved forging since childhood. That's why he was good at it. The old blacksmith suddenly remembered something. Hadn't Kang said he planned to take the sword with him? Kang nodded. That's right. Without warning, the old blacksmith reached behind him and produced a strange green metal. Kang's eyes widened. The metal radiated an unusual glow, unlike anything he'd ever seen. The old blacksmith proudly revealed its identity. Mithril, a legendary ore that had been passed down through his family for generations. Kang was stunned. Why would the old man hand over something so valuable? The answer was surprisingly simple. The old blacksmith had already learned so much from Kang, and now he wanted to learn even more. The ore was beyond his abilities. But perhaps Kang could do something incredible with it. He wanted to see what kind of blade this mysterious outsider would create. Holding the mithril in his hands, Kang felt his excitement rising. Mithril didn't exist in reality. It was the legendary metal he'd only ever read about. Of course, there was a risk. He had never worked with mithril before, but that only made things more exciting. Smiling, Kang announced that he'd just have to start over from the beginning. The old blacksmith immediately burst into laughter. He knew Kang would say that. Excitedly, he asked whether he could join in and learn a few things. Kang agreed without hesitation. After all, the old man had entrusted him with something priceless. That was when the blacksmith suddenly made a shocking request. Could he call Kang master? Kang nearly choked. What? The old blacksmith energetically continued, offering to speak respectfully if that would make things easier. Kang immediately refused. The man looked old enough to be his grandfather. But the blacksmith waved away the concern. Age didn't matter. Pause. Let's just hope his talking about blacksmithing. Please accept me as your disciple. At this point, Kang was completely fed up. He threatened to return the mithril if the old man kept acting like that. The blacksmith instantly backed down and begged him to wait. 1 month later, the results of their work were finally revealed. Standing before the infamous wooden training dummy that countless players struggled to defeat, Kang casually drew his newly forged mithril sword. One swing, that was all it took. The dummy was sliced apart effortlessly. A system window immediately appeared, displaying the weapon's incredible rarity and statistics. Another screen displayed Kang's own information level, 1 occupation, unemployed. Despite possessing a weapon that most players couldn't even dream of obtaining, Kang remained a level 1 beginner. Far away inside Ares' headquarters, several employees were monitoring his progress. One employee stared at the reports in disbelief. According to the data, Kang had logged into the game, gone straight to the forge, obtained mithril, crafted a powerful sword, and then cleared an event that most players were struggling with. The employee couldn't make sense of it. No matter how many times he reviewed the information, it was completely insane. Assistant manager Lee, however, wasn't nearly as impressed. She told him to stop gawking and focus on his work before he got himself demoted. The employee sighed. His biggest frustration was that he couldn't find more information on Kang. Assistant manager Lee casually read through the data they had managed to gather. 23 years old, lives in a small studio apartment, logged into the game from a friend's house. The employee immediately became excited. Had they tracked him down? Lee shook her head. They'd known his in-game location for a while. She was only reading the information because Kang had recently applied for a VIP capsule. That caught the employee's attention. Why would Kang suddenly apply for one? Lee explained that a response had finally arrived. Kang had only one request. He wanted his personal identity kept completely private. The employee was shocked. If word got out about his achievements, he'd become famous overnight, but Lee simply adjusted her glasses. Kang had been very clear. He wanted to remain anonymous. The employee eventually accepted it. Everyone had their reasons. Then he asked where Kang was currently located. Lee glanced at another screen. Her expression changed. Apparently, Kang had just entered the hunting training grounds. The scene immediately shifted back to Kang as he stepped through a large doorway carrying his newly forged mithril sword. A nearby instructor noticed him and immediately called out. The hunting grounds contained real monsters. A level 1 player had absolutely no business being there. The instructor warned Kang not to waste his time and suggested hunting rabbits first. A blue system window appeared, revealing the man's identity. Relson, hunting grounds instructor. Relson once again advised Kang to turn back. Kang couldn't help but wonder whether the instructor had actually looked at his equipment. Still, he politely assured Relson that he wouldn't waste anyone's time. Relson sighed in annoyance. If Kang insisted on taking the test, then he should at least grab one of the practice swords from the nearby barrel. Kang glanced down at his weapon. Then, with a small smile, he raised the gleaming mithril blade. If any sword is fine, can I use my own? Meanwhile, inside Ares headquarters, several employees stared at their monitors in disbelief. They discussed Kang's unusual progress, pointing out that he had spent an entire month in the beginner zone, an area that most players cleared in less than 30 minutes. During that time, he had accumulated tremendous basic stats and even obtained the beginner zone's only epic grade sword. Yet, despite all of that, Kang remained a level 1 player with no class. The employees admitted that they had overseen countless prodigies, artisans, and professional players over the years, but even compared to those exceptional individuals, something completely abnormal was happening with Kang. Concerned, they asked their supervisor whether they should intervene or leave the situation to the world's godlike super AI, AREs. Their boss simply smiled. He acknowledged their concerns but reminded them that Kang was still in a beginner hunting ground. Kang probably didn't even realize what fate awaited him. Rather than interfere, he wanted to see just how far this strange player could go. Back in Bardin territory, Relson stared at Kang with disbelief. That brat is really planning to use a sword he made himself, he thought. Looking directly at Kang, Relson scoffed. A handmade sword? Are you trying to become a blacksmith? A mocking smile spread across his face. To choose such a pathetic profession? What a pitiful fellow. Kang didn't respond. He simply stared back. Relson continued speaking, explaining that the area surrounding them was infested with dangerous monsters. In a place like this, a trained swordsman was infinitely more useful than some poorly crafted equipment. He couldn't understand why someone would choose blacksmithing of all professions and then come to a hunting ground like this. A blue notification suddenly appeared. Instructor Relson's affinity has decreased by 10. Kang wasn't surprised. He thought to himself that it was the same reaction he often saw in real life. Most people believed blacksmithing was no longer a worthwhile dream. But inside Ares, things felt different. Here, effort was recognized. Here, he believed he could finally be acknowledged for the work he put in. Looking at Relson, Kang calmly asked a question. Of all the swordsmen who passed through this training center, who was the most outstanding? Relson raised an eyebrow. Kang continued. I want to take a test even more difficult than the one they faced. For a moment, Relson was stunned, though he was merely an instructor assigned to a beginner hunting ground. Years of teaching countless players had given him an excellent eye for talent. Yet, hearing a mere beginner speak with such confidence caused anger to boil inside him. Another blue notification appeared. Instructor Relson has been provoked. Fine, Relson replied. Maybe you should try it once. A new system window appeared. A trial has been proposed. Relson motioned for Kang to follow him. As they walked, he explained that his duty was to teach newcomers the basics and evaluate them through examinations. However, for particularly talented individuals, he offered a special trial. It was the most difficult test available in the training grounds. Looking at Kang, Relson gave him one final warning. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Massive iron gates slowly rose from the ground. Beyond them stood a pack of level 6, swift goblins. Every one of them carried crude weapons, their faces twisted with bloodlust. Since you're so insistent on this reckless challenge, Relson said the price for failure will be equally high. If you fail, you're banned from these training grounds for an entire week. Go hunt rabbits instead. Do you understand? Instead of answering, Kang asked a different question. Is the third stage trial the final one? Relson blinked. What? Kang's expression remained calm. I want to clear every stage, all the way to the highest one in a single attempt. Relson's face twisted with fury. This beginner was completely disregarding the value of his training. The more Kang spoke, the more irritated he became. Without hesitation, Relson grabbed another lever and lifted the final stage's iron bars. Good, then go ahead and try it. The final gate rose, revealing a terrifying monster. A level 15 mad goblin stepped forward, wielding dual blades while sharp spikes protruded from its back. As Kang prepared for battle, Relson reflected on the challenge before him, across every training center in the world. Third stage clears were incredibly rare. As for the fourth stage, not a single person had ever succeeded. The battle began instantly. Two swift goblins charged forward while the mad goblin followed close behind. Kang barely managed to parry the first attack. The second goblin leapt into the air and brought its weapon crashing downward. As Kang blocked, something caught his attention. Any blacksmith could immediately recognize the poor quality of the goblin's weapons. At that moment, Kang activated Radiance. Physical attack power increased by 12%. Physical defense increased by 8%. Duration, 40 seconds. His sword flashed brilliantly. Steel collided with steel, and in a single motion, Kang sliced cleanly through one of the Swift goblins. A blue notification appeared. Swift goblin defeated. Before he could recover, the second goblin rushed in. Its blade slashed across Kang's torso, drawing blood. He grimaced in pain. Watching from nearby, Relson shook his head. Of course, the goblin had landed a critical hit. That was exactly why Swift goblins were considered the natural enemies of beginners. No matter how strong someone's equipment was, without proper combat skills, it didn't matter. Suddenly, Relson stopped mid-thought. His eyes widened. Kang was still standing, holding his bleeding side. Kang winced. That really hurts. His health bar dropped to 82%. Relson couldn't believe it. A level 1 player should have collapsed from a critical hit like that. Kang, however, felt relieved. During the month he had spent crafting weapons, he hadn't only increased his blacksmithing ability. His strength and stamina had grown tremendously as well. Relson gritted his teeth. It's still too early, he thought. The real danger starts now. The mad goblin suddenly exploded forward. Before Kang could react, the monster slammed into him with mad thorns. The impact sent him skidding backward across the ground. Status effects applied: dizziness, vision reduction. Relson's eyes widened in shock. That brat really is amazing, but this is the end. He's reached his limit. Both remaining goblins charged simultaneously. Kang steadied himself despite the dizziness. Taking a defensive stance, he focused completely. He trusted the weapon he had forged with his own hands. All he could do now was believe in it and fight. The monsters entered striking distance. Instantly, Kang activated Swift Blade. Attack speed increased by 1.7 times for 1 second. His sword moved like lightning. A single flash cut through the battlefield. Both goblins froze. Then they split apart. As Kang's blade completed its arc, he thought to himself, I can overcome even this much of a level difference. Far away, the Ares employees and their supervisor stared at their screens in complete shock. Back at the training ground, Relson stood utterly dumbfounded as Kang calmly posed amidst the defeated monsters. 2 notifications appeared: Swift Goblin defeated, Mad Goblin defeated. Relson could hardly believe what he was witnessing. This beginner had just accomplished something that no one else in the world had ever managed. Rushing forward, Relson grabbed Kang's shoulders. Your movements were rough and clumsy, he admitted, but those perfectly timed strikes brought out the full power of your sword. You must have studied swordsmanship somewhere. Kang shook his head. I was simply taught that a blacksmith should know how to handle the weapons he creates. Relson suddenly understood. Looking at Kang's muscular build and the countless scars and wounds covering his arms, realization struck him. This was what a true blacksmith looked like. A blue notification appeared. Instructor Relson's affinity has reached maximum. Relson bowed his head slightly. I owe you an apology for my behavior. Then he looked directly into Kang's eyes. Would you listen to a suggestion? I say this because I truly value your talent. Would you consider becoming a Mad Lord? A brilliant blue window appeared before Kang. Legendary class advancement quest available. Class Mad Lord, back at Ares headquarters. One of the employees nearly jumped out of his chair. That's impossible. He stared at the screen in disbelief. The Mad Lord was a legendary class, a rank even higher than the epic class Mad Knight. The female employee nodded. That alone makes him a grade 2 special management user. The male employee struggled to process what he was seeing. It's a good thing, right? It has to be a good thing. But once someone accepts a class advancement quest, there's no turning back. A Mad Lord is destined to command hundreds of Mad Knights. They're protectors of the world. Back at the training grounds, Relson smiled. What do you say? This isn't an offer I make lightly. You could become the King of Knights. Kang paused. Then he respectfully shook his head. I appreciate the offer, but I must refuse. Relson blinked. Kang smiled proudly. I am a blacksmith, not a knight. At Ares headquarters, every employee froze. Meanwhile, Relson burst into laughter, absolutely magnificent. As Kang stood there, memories surfaced. He never thought he would be able to wield a hammer again. Yet inside this game, it felt as though his life as a blacksmith was beginning anew. Suddenly, another notification appeared. Hidden quest acquired. Meet the Lord Grade B. Objective: meet Lord Barnes. Relson handed Kang a sealed letter. In that case, take this recommendation and travel to the Lord's castle. Someone extraordinary is waiting for an extraordinary blacksmith like you. Then Relson presented another reward. As for clearing the trial, I'll give you this armor. It once belonged to the former Mad Lord. The armor was covered in rust and had long since lost its original power. But I trust you'll find a way to make use of it. Relson's enthusiasm only grew. With a wide grin, he shouted, Go and challenge that place too. Show them the impossible things nobody else could achieve. I know you can do it. Kang scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I'll do my best. The scene shifted one final time back to Ares' headquarters. The female employee let out a long sigh. Kang just avoided the biggest crisis of his life. The male employee nodded. Yeah, he barely managed to preserve his true potential. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, the peak of the blacksmith profession. The possibility of obtaining the legendary God of Blacksmith class advancement? The tutorial was finally over. After spending an entire month in the beginner zone, Kang had finally cleared the training ground, entered the territory village, and received his very first main quest. The real game was only just beginning, but before any of that, he had something more important to deal with. Real life didn't stop just because he was inside a fantasy world. He still had bills to pay, even with an epic-grade mithril sword sitting in his inventory. Kang was still a 23-year-old struggling with everyday expenses, so he logged out, paid the gas bill, handled what he needed to, and returned to Ares with a clear head and a plan. The reason Kim had introduced him to Ares in the first place was simple: money. Items and equipment crafted inside the game could be sold through the auction house for gold, and 10 gold was worth 10,000 won in real-world currency. Some players had become so successful that Ares wasn't just a game anymore. It was their full-time job. Kim had watched Kang and his uncle work in a real forge for years. More than anyone, he understood how valuable Kang's blacksmithing skills could become in a game built around crafting and player-driven economies. He had told Kang from the beginning that his skills would work here. Now, Kang was finally starting to believe him. The path ahead was becoming clear: focus on blacksmithing, complete quests, earn gold, and somehow pay for his father's hospital bills. All he had to do was take the first step. His first move was visiting the auction house. Aside from Lightbringer, the epic sword he had obtained in the beginner zone, the only other weapon he possessed was a practice sword he had forged while learning the game's crafting mechanics. At the time, he hadn't taken it seriously. The sword was only rare grade. However, similar level restricted weapons were already selling for around 70 gold. Remembering Kim's advice not to undervalue his work, Kang listed it for 100 gold. He gave it a simple name: Hyun's first sword. After posting the auction, he left to explore the village and familiarize himself with the game's systems while waiting for buyers. He didn't have to wait long. The moment the listing appeared, bids began pouring in. Then the price kept rising, and rising, and rising. Kang stared at the screen in disbelief. Why wasn't it stopping? What he didn't know was that players all across Ares were losing their minds. The sword's description had immediately attracted attention. The best sword a level 1 player can wield, born from the humblest materials, a rare-grade weapon with enhancement potential, forged by a level 1 player, a player with no class, created using low-tier materials yet capable of carrying its owner all the way to level 50. News spread through the community like wildfire. Inside the Golden Shield Guild, one of the largest blacksmithing guilds in the game with 780,000 followers, a number Kim had once said was harder to earn than levels themselves, the Vice Guildmaster was suddenly dragged into the discussion. One guild member burst into the room holding the auction listing. The creator was level 1, no class, and the entire community was talking about him. The Vice Guildmaster calmly reviewed the weapon. The enhancement rates made sense. Lower tier materials naturally provided better enhancement success rates. That wasn't surprising. What impressed him was something else. The creator had intentionally used materials of the same grade throughout the forging process, dramatically reducing production costs while maximizing performance. That wasn't luck. That was intelligence then. His eyes landed on the item's name: Hyun's first sword, the first creation in what could become a legendary collection. The sword itself was valuable, but buying the blacksmith's first masterpiece, that was priceless. If Golden Shield became the guild that recognized him first, it would elevate their reputation across the entire game. The decision was made immediately. They were buying it. Back at the auction house, a notification suddenly appeared. Kang opened it, then nearly fell out of his chair. The sword had already sold. His eyes widened. For how much? 100,000 won. No, 1,000,000 won. Meanwhile, while chaos erupted around the auction, another event was unfolding elsewhere in Territory Village. A player named Bell was in the middle of a scam. Bell was level 100, a rogue. Using a disguise skill called False Promise, he had spent an entire week pretending to be a blacksmith and earning the trust of a local noble named Lord Vans. Now it was time to collect his reward. The target was a damaged bow. Bell had convinced Lord Vans that restoring it would cost 300 gold and require a trip to the capital. According to him, only a master craftsman there could repair it. A craftsman so important that he never met clients. A man who would never travel to a small territory like Bardeen. Lord Vans believed every word. The bow wasn't just any weapon, it was the only keepsake left behind by his father, a priceless treasure unlike anything else in existence. Then a voice interrupted. That bow can be restored right here. Everyone turned. Kang had unknowingly walked straight into the middle of the situation. With a single sentence, everything Bell had spent an entire week building was suddenly at risk. Lord Vans had heard enough. Without a second thought, he dismissed Bell on the spot. If I ever require your services again, I'll call for you. The message was clear. Until then, he wasn't welcome. Bell clenched his jaw as he turned and left the hall. An entire week of careful manipulation had just collapsed before his eyes. As he walked away, he muttered under his breath, "Who exactly is this Hyunsu?" Back inside, Lord Vans turned his full attention to Kang. There was no anger in his voice now, only hope. He explained that he couldn't bear to watch his father's heirloom continue to decay. All he had ever wanted was to find someone capable of restoring it. Looking directly at Kang, he asked him to take on the task. Hyunsu, will you restore this bow? But Lord Vans wasn't the only person with questions. One of his guards stepped forward and reported that Kang had entered the territory carrying a recommendation letter from Instructor Relson of the Beginner Hunters Training Ground. That immediately caught Lord Van's attention. Relson wasn't the kind of man who gave recommendations lightly. Even so, he wanted proof. He asked Kang directly about his experience and qualifications. Kang answered without hesitation. My name is Hyun Soo. I'm currently level 1, and my class is unemployed. Kang's gaze drifted toward the bow, then a memory surfaced. He saw himself as a child. His hands were scraped and dirty as he worked beside his father, carefully bending and shaping a bow frame. His father watched him with a smile. You little rascal. When you're older, I'll teach you proper smithing. But first, you need to train your hands. You need to learn how to understand materials. Young Kang had grinned confidently. Just wait, one day I'll be better than anyone. The memory faded. Back in the present, Kang looked at Lord Vans. When asked what materials would be required, his answer came instantly. Buffalo horns, whale sinew, if possible. Oak, mulberry, bamboo. And the proper tools. The moment the words left his mouth, a notification appeared. You have acquired the restoration method for the marksman's horn bow. Lord Vans stared at him. Then he asked another question. What did you notice about this bow? There is something unusual about its materials. Most bow craftsmen would have missed it. The bow didn't use standard cow sinew, it used whale sinew. But Kang had already figured that out. And so the restoration began. What followed was an entire week of work, a full 7 days, and during every single one of them, Lord Vans was there. Kang eventually asked why he kept coming personally instead of sending servants. Lord Vans smiled. Because this wasn't just a weapon, it was his father's legacy. If it was being restored, he wanted to help restore it with his own hands. Day after day, he followed Kang's instructions. He handled materials, prepared components, assisted wherever he could. By the end of the week, exhaustion was written all over his face. But he never stopped showing up. Kang noticed something else, too. No matter how tired Lord Vans looked, the moment he saw the bow taking shape, his expression brightened. The joy in his eyes made the long hours feel worthwhile. Finally, after 7 days of work, the restoration was complete. A notification appeared. Bow restoration complete. Lord Vans carefully lifted the finished weapon. The item's information appeared before him. Marksman's horn bow. Epic grade. Durability 3,500 out of 3,500. Attack power 253. Required level 80 and above. Special effects, accuracy plus 22%. Bow attack speed plus 17%. Passive skill, bow mastery plus 1. Active skill, triple shot. Then came the description. A reborn marksman's horn bow, crafted with greater precision and skill than the original creator. Lord Vans froze. For a long moment, he simply stared at it. Then he held the bow close and spoke quietly. Father, are you watching? Just like back then, a mysterious outsider has gifted this bow once again. See if it feels the same as you remember. The hall fell silent. When he finally looked back at Kang, there was a new respect in his eyes. For years, Lord Vans had tried to welcome outsiders into his territory. Again and again, he had been deceived by people making empty promises about priceless heirlooms. He was tired of it. From this day forward, he would only trust people willing to stand behind their words. Then Lord Vans smiled. The reward we agreed upon is nowhere near enough. Compared to what Kang had accomplished, it was insignificant. So he decided to add something extra, a lot extra. In addition to the original payment, Lord Vans awarded Kang 2,000 gold and unrestricted access to the territory forge for as long as he wished. Kang froze. 2,000 gold. 2,000,000 won. Enough money to cover living expenses for months. For a moment, he simply stared at the number. Then, Lord Vance surprised him with another question. Tell me, Hyunsu, have you ever considered learning swordsmanship? The Lord revealed something he had never mentioned before. Before becoming the ruler of Barden, he had been a swordsman. Not just any swordsman. He was one of the few people who possessed the prime sword art, the secret technique of the prime kingdom itself, the very swordsmanship that had helped suppress countless monster invasions and bring peace to the entire region. Lord Vans looked at Kang and spoke seriously. There is no doubt that you're a born blacksmith, but that's not all I see. He explained that after reading Instructor Relson's recommendation letter and watching Kang work firsthand, he had become convinced of something else. Kang possessed the talent of a swordsman, the way he handled tools, the precision in his movements, his physical conditioning, his reflexes, every detail pointed toward it. Because of that, Lord Vans decided to share a portion of the prime sword art with him, not the complete technique, but its foundation, its core. There wasn't much time, so Kang would need to learn quickly. Lord Vans even added one final condition. If I'm going to teach you, you'll have to work just as hard as you made me work in that workshop. Kang couldn't help but laugh. An unexpected gift, but one he gladly accepted. The month that followed was brutal. Every day was packed with training, crafting, and quests. Kang forged a Gakgung for himself. He restored the Mad Monarch's rusted armor. He completed the prime sword art training, and whenever he found spare time, he crafted rare-grade bows and listed them on the auction house. The income would help cover living expenses during the difficult quests ahead. One bow in particular attracted attention. He named it Hyun's second bow, rare grade. Durability, 2,400 attack power, 94. Usable from level 0 to level 60. Accuracy plus 13%. Passive skills, powerful shot and piercing arrow. Its description read, a bow crafted entirely from materials found within the beginner zone. A creation unlikely to ever appear again. The moment it appeared on the auction house, players lost their minds. Forums exploded, guild chats erupted. Even the strongest players couldn't believe what they were seeing. When Black, Korea's #1 ranked player, had reached level 10, he wasn't using a weapon this powerful. Yet somehow Hyun had remained level 1 and created something far superior using only low-grade materials. The discussion quickly spread throughout the community. One name kept appearing over and over again. Smith, the world's #1 ranked blacksmith years ago. Smith had made a statement that every craftsman remembered. In Ares, everything is ultimately decided by Ares itself. If the game acknowledges your journey, it rewards you accordingly. Jobs, titles, skills, unique classes. Everything depended on how deeply the world recognized your achievements. Now players were asking the same question. What kind of reward was Ares preparing for him? Meanwhile, Kang wasn't paying attention to any of the speculation. His own numbers told a much simpler story. Haeun's smithy had exploded in popularity. His follower count had risen from barely 80 people to over 3,200 guild invitations arrived every hour. Crafting commissions piled up faster than he could read them. And when the auction finally ended, the winning bid shocked even him, 2,050 gold. Over 2,000,000 won for a single bow. Someone had paid that amount without hesitation. After settling his affairs in Barden, Kang said his farewells to Lord Vans. Then he checked his equipment one final time. The Mad Monarch's armor. That was coming with him. Its damage reflection effect more than compensated for his low level. The Gakgung came too. Its accuracy bonus alone was absurd. Accuracy plus 60% satisfied. Kang turned toward his next destination, the Tower of Blacksmiths. He had been heading there for quite some time, and when it finally appeared in the distance, it exceeded every expectation. Majestic didn't even begin to describe it. The tower rose into the sky like a monument built for craftsmen alone. As Kang approached, he carefully studied its construction. Igneous rock, pumice-like materials, a magical forge built directly into the structure itself. The entire building was a masterpiece. After figuring out how to enter, Kang stepped inside. Waiting for him was an elderly blacksmith named Deng, the gatekeeper of the Tower of Blacksmiths, a swordsmith, and an extremely bitter old man. Deng had watched countless players walk through these doors. Every single day they asked the same questions. How much money can I make? What's the fastest item to sell? How do I earn gold quickly? Not one of them cared about craftsmanship. Not one of them cared about blacksmithing. To them, forging was just another method of making money. They hammered together scraps of metal using game skills and called themselves craftsmen. Deng was sick of it. The age of true blacksmiths was long gone. At least that's what he believed. Eventually, he stopped caring. If people wanted the title of blacksmith, he would hand it over. Forge a rough sword, swing it once, pass the test, leave. That was all anyone ever wanted. As for the sealing stone, nobody would ever cut it. Maybe they could leave a scratch if they were lucky. That was the test. Simple, in theory. Forge your own sword using the facilities inside the tower. Then strike the sealing stone. Most players treated it as nothing more than a crafting skill check. They rushed through the process, created mediocre weapons, and confidently swung them at the stone. The results were always the same. Their swords shattered, or barely left a mark. Kang walked toward the forge. His eyes widened slightly. The facilities were perfect refining equipment enhanced by magic, an endless supply of materials, a forge unlike anything he had ever seen, everything required to create a true Damascus sword. A small smile appeared on his face. It's been a while. Maybe I'll hammer to my heart's content. His father had already taught him the process years ago. A Damascus sword, a blade capable of cutting stone. Kang got to work. The ringing of steel echoed through the forge. Heat surged from the furnace, layer after layer. Fold after fold, hour after hour, every strike of the hammer carried years of experience behind it. Finally, the sword was complete. Kang walked toward the sealing stone. The room fell quiet, then he swung. One strike. That was all it took. The sealing stone split cleanly in half. Silence. Absolute silence. Dang stared at the destroyed stone. His eyes widened. His jaw dropped. For years they had used the sealing stone to measure talent, but now, the stone itself had been cut in half. There was nothing left to measure. Dang struggled to process what he was seeing. The god of blacksmiths, he muttered the words unconsciously. Then he looked at Kang. Do we need a retest? At that exact moment, a glowing magic circle appeared beneath Kang's feet. Everyone froze. Dang's eyes widened even further. That wasn't a retest. It wasn't part of the tower's examination at all. It was a summoning circle. The light swallowed Kang completely, then everything disappeared. A moment later, he found himself standing in an unfamiliar place. The system immediately issued a new quest notification. He was greeted by something completely unexpected. A quest notification appeared before him, but this wasn't an ordinary quest. The window itself looked different from anything he had seen before. SS rank quest, subjugate the invading orcs. The orc invasion threatening the Prime Kingdom had been growing more violent with each passing day. In response, Lord Dang had dispatched reinforcements to the front lines. That reinforcement was Kang Hyun-soo. At the watchtower, the soldiers had been expecting a seasoned fighter. Instead, what arrived was a level 2 player with no class, carrying nothing but a blacksmith's hammer. The subjugation leader Hans introduced himself with the confidence of someone who had survived countless battles. Then he immediately requested that Kang use his blacksmithing skill to repair the squad's damaged weapons. Kang quickly explained the misunderstanding. He hadn't actually become a blacksmith yet. Since he hadn't completed his class advancement, he couldn't use any blacksmithing skills. Hans looked down at the hammer in Kang's hand. Then why was he carrying it? Kang hurriedly explained that he had received the hammer during his class advancement test and had been sent here to complete an additional trial tied to the battlefield. Hans took a moment to process everything. The kingdom had supposedly sent reinforcements. Instead, they had received someone who needed protection. Since the orc assault was particularly fierce that day, Hans made a decision. Kang would stay at the watchtower where it was safe and wait until the battle ended. Looking toward the battlefield, Kang thought back to the goblins he had fought before. If he handled the orcs the same way, surely it would be manageable, right? Unfortunately, Hans didn't give him much time to think. Hyun-soo, follow Ben's squad. He'll guide you through everything. The squad welcomed him immediately. Hyun-soo, please take care of us. With that, they moved out toward the front lines. The moment Kang saw the approaching orcs, he felt the difference instantly. This was nothing like fighting goblins. The pressure alone was overwhelming. The creatures were larger, more aggressive, and every step they took seemed to shake the ground itself. This wasn't a hunt. This was war. Yet as Kang stood there with his bow drawn and the Lightbringer resting at his side, one thought settled firmly in his mind. He didn't feel like he was going to lose. The first clash began almost immediately. Steel rang through the air. Soldiers and orcs collided in a violent storm of blades and roars. Chaos erupted across the battlefield. Kang moved steadily through it all, calmly picking targets and supporting his squad with precise shots from his bow. Then the system appeared. You gained 86 EXP. A moment later, another notification followed. Level up! Ben glanced toward him in disbelief. A level 2 jobless player. He really hadn't changed classes yet. That was incredible, but there was no time to dwell on it. An orc suddenly broke through the formation and charged straight toward Ben. The distance was too short. No one else could reach him in time. Kang drew his bow. One arrow flew. The massive orc collapsed instantly. For a brief moment, the entire squad froze. An enormous orc had been taken down by a single arrow. Was that even possible? Ben quickly snapped back to reality. The surviving orcs were already rushing toward Kang. He had put himself in danger to save Ben. Now it was their turn to move. Kang immediately switched weapons. Drawing his sword, he activated Flurry. The blade became a blur slash after slash tore through the battlefield as the sword moved faster than the eye could follow. Orcs fell one after another, then another notification appeared. Level up. The system displayed information about an enemy passive ability, attacks indiscriminately. Before Kang could even fully process it, another notification appeared. Level up. The messages stacked on top of one another. Hans witnessed everything and raised his weapon. Everyone listen up! His voice echoed across the battlefield. Today, with Hyensu fighting beside us, we will annihilate the orc unit. The system immediately responded. Thanks to your performance, the squad's morale has increased. The soldiers erupted with renewed determination. Their charge became fiercer than it had been in days. Kang continued fighting alongside them as his contribution scores steadily climbed higher, but something felt strange. The contribution wasn't increasing nearly as quickly as he expected. Then the system revealed why. A new episode begins that has never been seen before. At that exact moment, a towering figure emerged from the battlefield. The orc boss had arrived. Hands immediately went still. At last, the enemy they had never been able to defeat. Their greatest nemesis, the boss, was enormous. Heavy armor covered its body, and behind it marched enough orcs to completely surround the squad. Hans cursed under his breath. In the excitement of their advance, they had pushed too deep. Now they were trapped. Enemies surrounded them from every direction. One squad member panicked. "We can't keep fighting like this. We need to retreat." Another soldier immediately cut her off. "We never retreat." Hans agreed. "Charge." The squad surged forward once more. Kang supported them from behind, firing arrows directly at the boss, but the attacks barely mattered. The orc boss's skin was like solid steel. The arrows struck, yet failed to inflict any meaningful damage. It still wasn't enough. Were they really going to be forced to retreat again? Then disaster struck. Hans took a direct hit from the boss and crashed to the ground. He barely managed to stay conscious. And that wraps up chapters 1 through 8 of the Genius Blacksmiths game. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap and want to see more content like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading new recaps more frequently, so stay tuned for future releases. Also, if there's a manhwa you'd like to see covered next, let me know in the comments below. I always enjoy hearing your recommendations. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.